Hi, my name is Panda. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Child and Youth Studies at Brock University. My co-authors, Zara Emami, Tofik Valiante, and Elizabeth Pang, are at the Hospital for Sick Children and the University Health Network in Toronto, Canada. I'd like to tell you about a new paper we recently published in Developmental Science. For many years now, neuroscience research has helped us to better understand how separate brain areas allow us to process specific kinds of information. The big push now is to learn how these systems work together and process information and share information in networks that are distributed throughout the brain. This can provide new opportunities to understand how the brain supports complex cognitive processes, like language, and new opportunities to understand the mechanisms of various neurodevelopmental disorders. One way to study the brain's functional networks using EEG is to look for synchrony in brain waves, or oscillations that are recorded at different electrodes over the head. A consistent correlation is thought to reflect coordination and integration of activity throughout networks that are distributed throughout the brain. This is really exciting because it could provide a solution to the binding problem, which is still a core question in cognitive psychology today. Our focus has been on addressing the language binding problem, or how it is that you right now can understand what it is that I'm saying when separate parts of your brain are processing separate features of my speech at different points in time. Others have termed this semantic unification. In this paper, we used EEG Phase Synchrony to ask, how do the functional brain networks supporting semantic unification develop in children? Specifically, how do individual differences in network communication relate to differences in children's developing language skills? This paper is among the first to use EEG Phase Synchrony to look at the development of the brain's functional language networks and how they're used during sentence processing. So we measured EEG from 26 kids, ranging in age from 4 to 17 years, while they watched cartoons. Embedded in these cartoons were meaningful sentences and sentences containing semantic violations, like these.
Pingu hits his fork against the table. He eats more toy than he did yesterday.
We looked at differences in brain activity while kids listened to meaningful versus meaningless sentences using two EEG measures. The N400, which is a classic measure of lexical retrieval and integration. It's measured at specific electrodes, and so it tells us about localized semantic processing. What's new, and hopefully you'll agree exciting about this project, is we also measured functional brain network communication. We use the phase lag index, which looks at how synchronous are the oscillations recorded at different electrodes over the head with a slight time lag. It tells us about how coordinated are neurosystems. We find that all children showed an N400 effect. However, its distribution and timing differed with development. At the top here, you can see an N400 that extends to frontal electrodes and is long-lasting. This was found mostly in the younger children. Older children, and those with stronger receptive vocabulary skills, showed an N400 effect that was shorter lasting and more localized and focal to posterior electrodes. The N400 measures the extent to which you can use the semantic context of a sentence to retrieve a word from your mental lexicon. This is a localized process, and we find it becomes more efficient with development. Our new finding is that communication from this posterior area also changes and differs with development. Here we can see the extent to which phase synchrony of slow frequency oscillations from right posterior electrodes differs over time for meaningful versus meaningless sentences. In this first box, you can see that we find a significant difference, more phase synchrony when listening to meaningful speech and less phase synchrony when listening to speech that just doesn't make sense. Here are the strongest connections that drove this effect. And here is how it relates to children's language skills. We find that children with strong receptive vocabulary skills showed the largest effect. In other words, they showed more network communication when listening to meaningful sentences and less network communication when listening to those violation sentences that just didn't make sense. We also found a second later effect. However, it was reversed. It was larger for violation sentences, and it related instead to kids' nonverbal reasoning skills. This could be an alternative processing pattern whereby kids tried to make sense of those violation sentences by integrating what they heard with what they saw in the cartoons. With EEG phase synchrony, we can measure the development of the brain's functional language networks. You can do this too by reanalyzing EEG data that you might already have. EEG phase synchrony can give us new insights into how we integrate language information across networks that are distributed across our brains, how network processing changes with development, and how it might be altered for kids who struggle with language. This could provide us new insights into why this is and how we can best help. I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you to my many collaborators, and thank you to EPLink in partnership with the Ontario Brain Institute for funding. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you.